Up everybody, my name is Justin French, covering music for those who care, and right now I'm going to take a look at the album Synthesis by Evanescence. Now, I know you're probably wondering why I'm not in the camera. Well, here's the thing about this album. Besides maybe 3 piano interludes and 2 new songs, the rest of this album is pretty much just some reworkings of their original stuff that they've had from the past 3 albums. I have to mention that this is released off of BMG Rights Management, or BMG Records, whatever you want to call it. It's pretty much becoming a really big label now because they've been signing a lot of people like Evanescence and A Perfect Circle. They even signed Blink-182. I'm not a big fan of them, but I thought it was pretty interesting. But anyways, yeah, I'm going to talk about the tracks and compare the ones that are original to the newer version that they had created for this album. So yeah, let me not waste any time into the tracks. So the first one that we get is Overture. Overture is just your standard original piano orchestral bass sound. So if you don't like intros, you can just pretty much skip that. That's what I did. I didn't really find it very much interesting, but I guess it's a good build-up to the next track, which would happen to be Never Go Back, which, in my opinion, is the heaviest track off of the self-titled album. Now, the one negative that I have to say about this track is that whenever it gets to the second verse, I don't feel that the drum machine in the song doesn't mix well with the second verse at all. But other than that, I think it's pretty good. I think that, in my opinion, this version of the song is better just because the atmosphere is heavy. Now, let me get into one of the newer tracks, which is High Low. And High Low is a track that I believe they've had for years, but they've never released it in anything. So it was pretty interesting to see that. And whenever it got to the I guess kind of breakdown bridge, whatever you want to call it, the middle part, there was a violinist all of a sudden in the middle of there, and whenever I was listening to it, I kind of wondered. I was like, this sounds so familiar. I think I've heard it before. I just don't know who could have done this. I went back to look up who it was, and it turns out this is actually Lindsay Sterling, who is a popular violinist. She actually played on America's Got Talent, but I think she got rejected. But in my opinion, I think Lindsay Sterling, I've heard some of her work, I think she's a pretty good violinist. And I think that just made the song a lot more epic than it already was. Alright, now we get to the next track, which is also from the self-titled album, which would happen to be My Heart Is Broken. Now, the one thing I don't like about this track is the vocals, I guess. Because I think the vocals on that song really had a lot of grit to what the song was. And that's pretty much why I like the original more than this version. So, okay, and then we get into probably one of the standout tracks from this record, which is Lacrymosa. And Lacrymosa was from The Open Door, which is actually my favorite Evanescence record. But it still retains that kind of epic Renaissance feel, because whenever I listened to it first, it kind of did sound a little Renaissance-y, kind of. And I think that the choir really added something to it, especially in the original. Now, in this one, I think that the reason why I like this version more than the original is just because of how the electronics flow in this version. And I like Amy Lee's voice a lot on this song. I think that's another standout for this track. Then we get to a song, The End of the Dream, which is from the self-titled record. And while the original was heavy, I feel like this one was more kind of gloomy and depressing. But I have to say that I love the acapella that opens the track. And that's probably why I like this version more. And then we get to Bring Me to Life, or as they call it, Bring Me to Life Synthesis. This track has been around since August, I believe. And I never got around to talking about it. Whenever I first listened to it, I wasn't particularly sold on it. But after giving it a couple listens, I think that it's a pretty good rendition. I think the only reason why is probably just because it's more slow and sluggish. Maybe it just took its time a little more than it was supposed to, and I like the fact that they kind of omitted Paul McCoy's verse in the track, but in my opinion, I think the original is better. Just because I think that it's something that everyone knows. And while this version is good, I think everyone would more remember that version than the newer version that they had just put out. And then we get to a track which is an interlude called The Unraveling, just another interlude, you can skip it. And then we get to Imaginary, which happens to be one of my favorite Evanescence songs that the band has ever released. I like that it opens with the orchestral and then the vocals open immediately. It doesn't feature that Paper Flowers intro that they did on the original, but in my opinion, I think the original is way better. I don't think that it really flows well. This version flows well on this album, in my opinion. And then we get to Secret Door, which is from the deluxe version of the self-titled record. I wasn't a big fan of this song, and I guess the one thing that stands out from it is the use of the harp, I guess. But other than that, I wasn't a big fan of that song. And it's pretty much just the same here. Just added a little bit more of an orchestral feel. Other than that, just the same. Skip it. Next up, we got Lithium, which is probably one of my favorite singles that Evanescence have ever released. And I have to say that this version of the song feels more atmospheric. It feels more dark and kind of gloomy. And I like the synths and chimes that open the song to give it more of that feel. And I really like Amy Lee's voice in this version. I think it adds more to it. And while I do like the kind of heaviness that the guitars bring to it, I feel like it's just as equally heavy when you bring in the strings and synths and chimes into the song. I think it adds more atmosphere to it. I think that's probably why I like this track more. And then we get to Lost in Paradise, which is from the self-titled record. I was never a fan of this song, even though it was released as the last single from the self-titled. I just wasn't a fan of it, honestly. And I guess the one thing that kind of sticks out amongst this version is that it builds up in the second half to more of a, the orchestral stuff, pretty much, instead of just the band build up. And that's the one thing I have to appreciate for this album. They didn't go back to the roots of just doing standard shtick. They kind of wanted to do something that was out of the box, something unordinary. So I have to give them props on that. And then we get to a track from The Open Door, which is Your Star. Your Star is... It kind of features the same grid as the original, and I think that's probably... And I think that this version adds a little more with the orchestral elements to it. So that's probably why I like this track more. And then we get to one of the band's popular tracks from anything they've released, which was My Immortal, which is from the album Fallen. And I have to say that it has kind of the same dark and gloomy atmosphere as the original did, but I think this one really feels more emotional than the original did. And not to say that that one was ever bad, because it really wasn't. I really like that track, and I grew up listening to that song. But when you listen to the orchestral backing that backs up in this track, I think that adds a lot of the emotion to what makes this song very emotional, and with that dark and gloomy atmosphere. And that's probably why I like this track more than the original. Next track we got is the In Between, and this is like a 2-minute piano intro into the next and final track that closes this album, which is the single that they released for this album and the sole composition they've released from 2017, which would happen to be Imperfection. Imperfection is also one of the newer tracks, and the subject matter of this is, according to Amy Lee, a plea to fight for your life, which is kind of like maybe an anti-suicide kind of song. And I have to say that the electronics that flow throughout the song really flow very well in the song, and Amy's voice really hasn't lost any touch from anything she's done. So yeah, I think that's probably another standout. So yeah, those are my standouts, and I will be right back to give you my opinion overall. And I'm back. Did y'all miss me? I sure missed you. Alright, so let me give you my overall feelings about this album. I think that this album is pretty different, pretty unique, something that's definitely out of the box, something that actually I would recommend. I think this is a great album if you're into something that wants to experiment with electronica and orchestraic kind of instrumentation. But overall, I would definitely recommend this album. And plus, you get some of their hits together and a couple new tracks, and it's a pretty good album. I don't want to say it's gonna make my year-end list for best album, but I don't want to say that it can't, because, you know, anything can happen at this point. So for me, overall, I think I'm gonna have to give this a strong 8.5, maybe a light 9 out of 10. So thank you all for watching. If you would like to subscribe to my channel, you can click right here to see what I'm going to be doing next. If you would like to watch a previous video that I have uploaded, you can click right over here to watch that. So thank you all for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you soon.